Hi, Roy here, and welcome to another edition of The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garten, and on this edition, we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to basically focus today on the protests and also Trump's parade that is going to be getting today on the, as I take this podcast. And so let's go ahead and get into it because I really am amazed by about all the things that are going on in this particular Saturday as I take this podcast. The reason that I'm focusing on all this is because there's been a lot of stuff going on, especially some of the defiance that we have been seeing with the Trump administration. Now, before I begin, I do want to emphasize that I am all for the safety of law enforcement, the National Guard, as it pertains to, really violent protests. And they have to be safe, just like the protesters. So, but there is a lot of, for lack of better words, verbal suggestions, body movement that say, we're going to really take you down if you even begin to show any kinds of signs of violence, especially on this day where we're going to have national protests across the country with no King's Day. But before I get into that, let's start getting into some deep dive of some of the things that I really want to talk about. Now, thousands of people nationwide have shown up at demonstrations and rallies opposing immigration and customs enforcement raids, as we have seen. And, all for that. That's what people's First Amendment rights are. But dozens have been arrested or detained in several cities, including Seattle and New York, as ICE officers carried out raids this past Friday at 3 locations, specifically Los Angeles, as we have seen on the national news. And yes, some violence have broken out there. Dozens of people were taken into custody. Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom has called the raids chaotic and federal sweeps that aim to fill arbitrary arrest quota, which is true. It has been no secret that the Trump administration said that they want to arrest 3,000 people a day, and he has said that. And it's basically, what are you going to do? Newsom knows that, and so does everybody else. The department called California's legal effort to block the Trump administration's from sending the military to deal with protesters in Los Angeles a crass political stunt, and that is true. Newsom has filed, paperwork to say that he wanted this stuff stopped. Now, what has been going on here is the fact of the matter is that things have changed since then. Now, we all know that Donald Trump, in recent news that we have just seen here, has said the following, I'm going to start backtracking just a little bit about some of this immigration stuff that's been going on. Now, what Trump has said is that he now feels that, immigrants that are working in the farm industry and hospitality and in retail, maybe they belong here. And so I'm going to back off on that, doing raids with hitting those particular types of industry. And maybe they do have a place in our society to work. So Trump has backtracked a little bit about that since Newsom has filed that paperwork. Also, the National Guard is scheduled to leave the Los Angeles area. So he says. So we'll have to wait and see and find out about that. Troops in Los Angeles and Texas are still there presently, but, in California, they're supposed to be leaving pretty soon. President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the deployment of about 700 Marines and more than 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles. Now, speaking of Marines, they have, and this is kind of scary, they have actually done their first detainment. This is not an arrest. Marines have no arrest authority, but they have detained their very first U.S. citizen. Take a look at this.
I freaking was trying to go to the VA and was trying to go across, and they told me to stop first. And of course I complied when I crossed the first checkpoint, and they told me to basically get down the ground. Nothing wrong, just basically comply to everything they were saying. And it's just, we're at the worst time, worst situation where people are becoming more aggressive with what's going on, right? But as long as you feel like complied and everything worked, everything's natural, we're good and okay, and now I'm free to come back home. But the VA is closed. So everyone needs to know the VA is closed right now. The first time I wanted to cross under the yellow tape just because I didn't want to go all the way around. They told me to basically go back. I went back to the first checkpoint, and that's when they thought I was basically trying to do this again and become more aggressive, because you've seen other protesters been going more aggressive.
So as you can see, that is the first time in recent U.S. American history that something like that has happened. Now, of course, the individual speaking, kind of said, yeah, that's on me. I didn't know that, the Veterans Affairs Office was closed and blah, 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 blah. But still, to see something like that happen is a little bit scary. Now, let's move on to some other things that have been going on here just recently. Yes. Kristi Noem. There has been a lot of stuff in the news with her recently, and the news on that has been, the fact of the matter is that, yes, we have a little battle going on, and that is between Kristi Noem and U.S. State Senator from California, Alex Padilla, and what has been going on there is, the fact of the matter is that we had a little incident. Take a look at this.
Have placed on this country and what they have tried to insert into this city. So I want to say thank you to every single person that has been able to do this. Also, I want to talk specifically to the rioters.
Sir, hands up, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to
hands off.
How many of our ICE agents have been docked?
On the ground. On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you don't have my hands, go ahead, put behind my back.
All right. Cool. Other hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
There's no recording allowed out here. I did not know. There's no recording allowed out here per FBI, right? For what? I'm sorry? There's no recording allowed out here. That's my boss. I have to record everything out here. You can record. There's no recording allowed out here. I'm not a member of the press. There's no recording allowed. I understand that, sir, but...
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. You guys have some questions. I'm going to read a brief statement. I will not be taking questions, but allow me to read my statement. I'm here in Los Angeles today, and I was here in the federal building, in the conference room, awaiting a scheduled briefing from federal officials as part of my responsibility as a senator to provide oversight and accountability. While I was waiting for the briefing with General Guillot, I learned that Secretary Noem was having a press conference a couple of doors down the hall. Since the beginning of the year, but especially over the course of recent weeks, several of my colleagues have been asking the Department of Homeland Security for more information and more answers on their increasingly extreme immigration enforcement actions. And we've gotten little to no information in response to our inquiries. And so I came to the press conference to hear what she had to say, to see if I could learn any new additional information. And at one point, I had a question. And let me emphasize, just as we've emphasized the right for people to peacefully protest and to stand up for their First Amendment rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question. I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room. I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed. I was not arrested. I was not detained. I will say this. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California and throughout the country. We will hold this administration accountable. And we'll have more to say. We'll have more to say in the
yes,
coming.
Padilla was forcibly removed after he interrupted a Los Angeles press conference immigration by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And as you saw from the video, he got roughed up a little bit. And what has been so, for lack of better words, lies is Kristi Noem says, well, I didn't know who he was.
I don't even know the senator. He did not request a meeting with me or to speak with me. So when I leave here, I'll have a conversation with him and visit and find out really what his concerns were. I think everybody in America would agree that that wasn't appropriate. That if you wanted to have a civil discussion, especially as a leader, a public official, that you would reach out and try to have a conversation.
If you got a director of Homeland Security like she is, and she doesn't know who her congressional delegation is in both the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, something's wrong. But as you know, Trump has appointed a lot of people with absolutely zero government experience. And so it doesn't really surprise me that maybe she doesn't know who these people are, because she, stands up there with her little hat and long flowing brown hair and just smiles and, and goes out and just basically carrying out Trump's agenda. We're going to be tough and by God, look at this, and we're going to not put up with anything. So, and Patello, he was a little surprised by that. And not only that, now you got Mike Johnson and everybody else saying, we need to, censor him for all this stuff. And he was just frustrated, and to say he doesn't know who he is when he was basically shouting there, as you saw the video, I am a U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, and everybody knows who he was, yet she claims I don't know who that guy was. So I don't know. The other thing that's going on here, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact of the matter is that the aggressiveness that we are hearing from local all the way, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but all the way up to the president of how aggressive and darn right violent that that they're going to be if they see any kind of violence and protesting. And they're all saying, hey, we expect your right to protest, peacefully. But if you just get one little bit out of sorts there with us, we're going to take action. And now Trump, speaking to reporters this past Tuesday, made no distinction between the right of peacefully assemble that is guaranteed by the First Amendment and engaging in violence and vandalism assembled during a military. And this is for his parade, which is happening as I record this podcast. He actually basically was asking the people who are protecting him and, the Secret Service, everybody else, I'm thinking, can you just shoot the people in the leg? Is that okay? Because he doesn't want any protests at all on his parade. It is the 250th anniversary of the Army, and that's great. But, he said that people who do protest are going to be met with a very big force. This is a dark warning that made no distinction between peaceful demonstrations and violent confrontations in remarks from the Oval Office before he left for North Carolina, which he was going to talk about events at Fort Bragg. And I'm going to get into that in a minute, too, because that was, for lack of better words, a big farce. Now, what is sad here is, he pardoned thousands of people with the insurrection against the Capitol when he found out he didn't win his next term there. That was okay. Those people are patriots that stormed the Capitol and officers died and stuff. But people who protest, well, he's now in office. Well, by God, you can't do that. I'll make sure that you're going to be taken care of. So it's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. He was boasting about the amazing day he's planning for today, and of course it may rain on his parade, literally, because the weather's not supposed to be too good. But he said that any demonstrators would be dealt with harshly. For those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force, Mr. Trump said. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but this is people that hate our country. So if you exercise your First Amendment rights, which is no King's Day today, you hate your country. But those people that stormed the Capitol when they found out that they thought the election was rigged, did they hate their country? And that was okay. See, he doesn't understand the difference here. But he wants to meet them with very, very heavy force. So we're going to have to see what happens on that with these people that do protest. He just lacks a lot of, critical thinking skills. But, most people in his office today, that's what we're kind of seeing. He also went on to claim that the people in Los Angeles that were protesting without any evidence, he said that they were paid insurrectionists, that people out there who were causing the violence, they were paid to do that. And that Los Angeles was under siege and that they were going to burn the whole city down. That's why he had the National Guard and the Marines there, because while there were isolated incidences, 95% of the protests that went on there were peaceful. There was actually scenes and videos where the police officers from the Los Angeles Police Department were actually shaking the hands of the protesters that were protesting peacefully, and that there was actually hugs and stuff, and there was actual video and images of that. So 95% of the protest that was happening was peaceful. And of course the media picks up on the ones that were violent. And yes, there was some violence that occurred. I'm not going to deny that. Very transparent. But to say that the whole freaking city was under siege and people were being killed and they were paid insurrectionists, Trump again, he likes to say things and expand things out that aren't actually true. And of course, with the military and the National Guard there, that did inflame tensions, as it always will be. So, there's the things that you're going to see on that in the media is going to make you think that what you're seeing there is going on all over the place, and that's not true. Because you can't make any distinction between the right to peacefully assemble that is guaranteed by the First Amendment and engaging in violence and vandalism, which of course is not guaranteed, and yes, that should be handled by the law, and I'm full in favor of that too. I'm not endorsing violence and protests. Sometimes people take things to the extreme because nobody's paying attention to them, and that's all the peaceful demonstrators exercising their First Amendment right. They just want to be heard. A lot of times people just ignore them. So going back to this parade today, which is the 250th anniversary of the Army and Trump's 79th birthday, which he thinks is more important than the military, progressive groups are organizing demonstrations, as they are across the U.S., with no King's Day protest, which is also happening here in Florida. And like I said, I got some news on that as well. So, what the media is going to cover is probably both. They're going to cover some of the parade and they're going to cover the protest as well. But what's been concerned about this whole thing with this parade and with Trump's birthday is the amount of money that has been spent on that. It's going to cost taxpayers probably up to $45 million. I said $1 million for having Trump's little birthday. And there's been a lot of people that have been upset about this because we have never had a military parade with the president sitting there, on his big little grandstand that was built for him, waving and sitting there with his arms crossed like he is, some king like you see in North Korea or like you see in Russia. We have never done this, but he wants this done. And the first time he tried to do this in his first term, it was voted down because there was a little bit more control with the House and the Senate with the Democrats there. They thought it was a waste of money. So it's just, I don't know. It's scary. And this is what I want to talk about today for my top story on my podcast here is what could you really do with $45 million? And this is what I want to discuss. If you're going to spend $45 million plus for a parade and plus the cleanup, plus fixing the streets from the tanks crossing over it, you could buy 14 million lunches for high school students with the School Nutrition Association's national average for the price of high school lunches at $3.20. And of course, as you know, Trump is cutting all of that. Funding for Medicaid coverage for almost 6,000 eligible people for a year you could do with $45 million, which Trump is cutting Medicaid. For children alone, close to 14,900 could be covered with that. In Alabama, where children are more than half of all Medicaid recipients, more than 21,700 children could be covered for a year with that $14 million we're spending on Trump's parade. And those figures are based on KFF data that shows Medicaid spending per enrollee in 2021 was $7,593 for all eligibility groups, $3,023 for children, and $2,069 for children in Alabama alone. What else could you do with $45 million spent on a parade? Providing more than 4,500 Georgia households with subsidized housing assistance for one whole year. In 2023, the Department of Housing and Urban Development contributed an average of $830 per month per household, or $9,960 per year, to supplement the rent people living in subsidized housing that was paid, according to USA Facts. Again, housing in HUD is being cut by proposed Trump's big, beautiful bill. The hell with those people. If you're not rich, I don't want anything to do with you. Covering a year of disability compensation for more than 7,200 military veterans with a combined disability rating of up to 50%. The average annual veteran disability compensation payment ranges from $1,425 to $48,227 per person, according to a 2024 USA Facts analysis of data from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. We got $45 million. We don't want to help you. I want to have a big, beautiful parade for my 79th birthday. This figure is based on the average compensation per person for veterans with a combined disability rating of up to 50%. Another thing you can do with $45 million, helping to feed nearly 17,700 people for a year through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, another program being cut by the Trump administration. In fiscal year 2023, SNAP benefits averaged $211.93 per participant per month, according to the United States Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service. So, again, what I just talked to you there about, $45 million for an hour parade so Trump can sit up there with his arms crossed, just looking like I am the king. You know, if they can do it in North Korea and have big military parades with tanks and jeeps and soldiers marching, and like we've seen in 1939 Germany with the soldiers walking by, with their salute to that man with a little mustache. That's what Trump likes. It makes him feel big. It makes him feel important. Again, even the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, this is all being subdued by Trump being there, okay? Because they want everything to focus on him. And I can tell you right now, whatever media may cover the parade and showing Trump, I'm sure the protests are going to be shown too with, No King's Day. Again, our people's First Amendment rights to do so. So, it is absolutely amazing how you can spend all of this money on something like this and not be affected by it. So I don't know. Folks, this stuff is absolutely amazing. Trump is also tearing up portions of the Rose Garden, which is maintained by the National Park Service. And why is he tearing up the Rose Garden sections of it? Is because he wants to put American flags all along there. Like we've already got a flag on top of the Capitol building and in that area, but he wants more flags surrounding the White House. So to do that, he is going to tear up the Rose Garden. So it's the Rose Garden has been there for decades and decades. And but he's also going to put a mural up of pictures of himself around the White House. He's going to do that as well and have a lot of that in gold flake along there. So, folks, it just amazes me about some of the crap that we see going on here. You look at this stuff and you're like, why are we doing this? And the question is nobody knows except Donald Trump. Moving on. Now, I was talking earlier about what was going on in with that Fort Bragg rally. This is all leading up to the 250th birthday bash that we're seeing here with the military, the U.S. Army, and Trump. So let's take a little bit of deep dive into that too, because that Fort Bragg speech that Trump had, it was literally, and I mean this, and the Army's backing it up, a lot of that was staged. And how was it staged? Well, it wasn't a customary visit from a president that you usually see. He gave a big speech with a lot of partisan politics, condemning the Democrats and, getting jeers from all those soldiers that was behind his podium, and a lot of sarcastic looks from Trump as he attacked his political foes and whipped up boos from those soldiers. And why did he, pick up boos from those soldiers? It was because they were all hand-picked before the event even began. And also there was a merchandiser from Oklahoma selling merchandise to those same soldiers. And some of that merchandise said white privilege on it and things like that. So yes, before the event even began, it was made very apparent, and this is all in military.com if you want to read this, and the military.com talks a lot about our veterans and our soldiers, that the whole event was tightly orchestrated just to make sure that Trump was shown in a positive light. All of those soldiers were handpicked to make sure that they were Republican, that they were fit, no heavy-set soldiers, and that they all supported Donald Trump's politics. So that's why you saw a lot of the cheers and, yeah, go Trump, is because every one of them was hand-selected to be visible on the cameras. And you noticed almost all of them were male soldiers, no female soldiers. And the thing said on Trump's agenda, on his pre-planning, that there was to be no fat soldiers. And this was all also done by Pete Hegseth, and that their views all aligned with Donald Trump. So that's why you saw that. And as for the merchandiser from Oklahoma, he sold a lot of stuff that was like white privilege and everything in the way of Donald Trump with his image on it. Of course, when the Army was asked about all of this, they declined to comment. One spokesperson said they would check up on the merchandiser selling stuff because that wasn't supposed to happen. But as for the rest of it, no comment. We don't know what's going on there. So, to have pop-ups at a military event and to have soldiers that were specifically picked and have people selling stuff with Trump's everything and white privilege and giving that out. This is what our, our military is coming down to. It's again, folks, why do we have this stuff going on? is beyond me. It's so freaking scary. It really, really is. And this brings everything back to home here in Florida. As you know, I live here in Florida, and I am just a stone's throws away from Brevard County. And right now, as there's going to be thousands of Floridians expecting to be on the, No King's Day National March as well, too, here with, rallies and having their voices heard. But our wonderful Governor Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, is still under investigation for that $10 million that he gave to his wife's charity, and he is told that the Orlando Sentinel was supposed to cease and desist and not do any further investigations. And of course, the Orlando Sentinel said, "Not on your life. We're going to continue to investigate what all this money is doing." But DeSantis said in a presser that drivers will not be at fault if they decide that they want to run over protesters if they block their vehicles, and that if they do run over any protesters and kill them, that's okay. You go right ahead and do that. So when he was interviewed in a podcast episode, he said, drivers have the right to defend themselves in Florida, and so if you decide that you're going to run over people, that's okay. You won't be prosecuted. He went on to say that you have a right to flee for your safety, and if you drive off and if you hit one of those people, that's okay. So, sorry that it happens, but yeah, that's what Governor Ron DeSantis said, that he's endorsing, as I'm going to show you in another clip, about here in Florida, our folks are they're going to have their rights, since if the protests remain peaceful, that's okay. But if you you get a little violent there and you're going to block cars, go ahead and run over those protesters. One Democrat Florida Senator, Shervin Jones, who represents the Miami Gardens district and other sections of North Miami-Dade, he says, so can an individual who's just standing there and something breaks out of, something happens and they're just a bystander, they can be arrested? Or if a guy in a car decides he's going to go ahead and run over protesters, is that okay too? What are we going to do here? This made national news, here in Florida, where, they've lowered the age where 18-year-olds can now carry handguns, and you don't need a permit, that anybody can be packing and it's okay. If people have the right to defend themselves, I get that. I really do. Again, I say, if protesting gets out of hand and it gets violent, people got to protect themselves. But to for our governor to say, if you're in a car and the protester is blocking your vehicle, it's okay to run them over, and if you kill them, you won't be charged. It's on you. That's fine. And the last thing I'm going to say on this podcast is this clip that I'm going to show you now is just, I said, right up of the Brevard County line where I broadcast from is just a couple of miles. So Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey, whom when I used to live in Brevard County, I personally know, and he loves to grandstand. He's a very guy that loves the attention on himself with his, Wheel of Fortune thing that he does where he shows a criminal of the week and all that. Wayne Ivey has become a kind of a national icon. Anyway, so he did a presser too with his advice on this No King's Day protest. If you want to protest peacefully, that's fine. But if you start throwing a bottle or something at my deputies, or if you don't obey the law, we're going to kill you. Did he really say that? Watch.
I want to define a couple things, and our general was very kind in how he said things. I'm not as usually as elegant in how I say things, so I'm gonna first say that peaceful protests are part of our democracy. We invite people to share their opinions. That's what our country is all about. The key word in that is peaceful, and if it's peaceful, us in law enforcement are going to make sure you have a safe environment to do it in. That's part of that process. If you let it turn violent, whoo, you do not want to do that in Brevard County. I'm going to tell you that, and I believe I can speak for my fellow sheriffs around the rest of the state. You don't want to let it happen. And just so there's no confusion, because I don't want to hear any whining later saying we didn't know, I'm going to break it down for you, all right? Because as you watch these riots unfold across the rest of the country, what you are seeing is buildings being burned down, police cars being bricked, having explosive devices thrown on them, having fire, guns pointed at them, bricks thrown at them, all and on. So I'm gonna break it down for you, all right? And if somebody wants to know what I mean by turn violent, all right, this is what I mean. If you resist lawful orders, you're going to jail. Let me be very clear about that. If you block an intersection or a roadway in Brevard County, you are going to jail. If you flee arrest, you're going to go to jail tired, because we are going to run you down and put you in jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail, and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play. This has got to stop. You're watching what's taking place out there. You're seeing police officers that are being attacked, being spit on, being put in harm's way just for doing their jobs. You're seeing ICE agents that are being targeted for doing their jobs. And you're seeing obstructionists that are doing all of this, standing in the way of law and order. Not here, not in the state of Florida. So, to make it real simple, if you don't want to have any of those things happen to you, obey the law. Go protest all you want. Do it peacefully. Stand on the mountaintops and yell your opinion, your views. We invite that. But don't you dare break the law.
So as I wrap up this podcast for the National No Kings Day protest that's going on, and for those of you who are going to watch the parade, good for you. As you can see, our nation is in deep distress. Because of the fact of the matter is, the idea that when you had the January 6th insurrection against the Capitol, Trump thought that was just all okay. Now, when they're doing stuff in protest of him, like the phony vote that never occurred, and he wasn't, he was elected, but it was all rigged, and so he wouldn't get, which has been proven again and again that that's not true. I look back at those January 6th insurrection and all those people that got pardoned. That was okay. But for people who protest today because of the National Guard or the Marines in their state, and they're going to protest No King's Day, and everybody's putting the fear of God in them that if they just do one little thing get out of hand, they're going to get killed. See how things are reversed for the Republicans. That's all okay. You're going against what we want. We're going to take over this country. As the United States becomes more of an authoritarian country, and it's obvious that it is, you get somebody in power that says, unless you do something that's in favor of me, you're going to pay for it. People are scared. And so, yes, the people of the United States are revolting. They're coming around saying, hey, I don't really like this. So I pray to God that all the protests that do occur today, as people express their First Amendment rights, it is peaceful. Because if it's not peaceful, I fear for their lives. And to put that kind of fear in their lives, that's scary. Because again, I go back to January 6th, where Trump told the people that stormed the Capitol and all, get angry, get mad, go out there and do it. That was totally different, because but today he goes, if you're not going to support me, by God, you better watch your step. Again, very, very sad, very, very scary. God, I love this country. Like as I said in my podcast, I was a Republican for 51 years of my life. And I supported Donald Trump on his very first election until he was in office for about 6 months, and I saw what kind of a guy he was becoming. So you've seen a lot of Republicans, drop the party affiliation. They become independents or Democrats, and it's sad, and especially what we got today. And now we've got Israel bombing Iran. And things are not well in our world today, folks. It's not well at all. You try to have a good week. Until next time, this is Roy with The Right Has Left. I thank you for joining my podcast. Look forward to your comments. Try to have a good week. Take care.